Hey, and welcome to today's episode of Think Like an Architect. We're in episode 5. My name is Scott Ratliff. I am a principal architect evangelist for Salesforce. Today, we're going to talk about something that I think is going to be very interesting, especially since it was just recently announced at TDX. We're going to be talking about Headless 360. And before we get into things, I'd like to bring on my two experts to introduce themselves. Welcome, Carl and Leo. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I can go first. Good morning, everyone. My name is Leo Tran. I'm a distinguished architect and chief architect of the platform engineering team. Have been with Salesforce for 18 years and have seen all the industry changes that we and Salesforce has gone through from social to mobile. And now my latest focus is on delivering the Headless 360 vision.
Perfect.
And I'm Carl Brundage, also a distinguished technical architect on the platform distribution team here at Salesforce. And what that means is I sit at the intersection of what our platform can do, the things that Leo and team are building, and the realities of what our customers' enterprise architecture looks like. So I spend a lot of my time answering questions like, well, how do we actually become an agentic enterprise? And that's what Headless 360 helps answer that question. So I think that's why, Scott, you drugged me here today is to talk about those things.
Definitely. And just real quick before we get going, what are your takes on the whirlwind since Headless 360 has been announced?
It's super exciting to kind of see how this is resonating with folks and loving. Looking forward to talking more about how we realize the vision that Salesforce can be everywhere, just as it was back in 1999 when we first started, and now we'll see how it's everywhere in the agentic era.
Perfect. Carl, any comments?
Yeah, I have similar thoughts. I've been a lot of the world tours, and there's just been phenomenal attendance at some of the events to get understanding of the different components of how you can build with any agent, you can deploy on any surface. And the part where I spend most of my time, the governance aspects, maybe it's not what everybody first thinks of, but what that opens up for being able to move a lot of these AI initiatives into production, instead of getting stopped by security or infosec is really important to moving fast.
All right, great. No, that's awesome. Definitely. I was super excited when they announced it too, mostly because my background is in MuleSoft, and so integration is kind of the big aspect of things that I look forward to. So thanks. Okay, so let's get going on the slides today, and we'll bring back Carl and Leo for questions at the end. But today we're going to design an AI native architecture with Headless 360. And before I get started, we always have to go over these forward-looking statements. So, of course, make all your purchasing decisions based off of what is generally available. We probably will talk a little bit about some future-focused stuff, but just be sure to make those purchasing decisions off of what's generally available. And also save the date for the next episode of Think Like an Architect, episode 6. We don't have a subject yet, mostly because the subjects are usually picked based off of the feedback from this session. But that date is June 25th. It'll be at the same time and the same day of the week, just in about a month. So what are we going to talk about today? So if you've been to a Think Like an Architect episode, you're kind of familiar with this, and we're going to follow that same format. And it's a 3-step approach. We're going to talk about the what, how, and why side of things. And it's really what most architects do to kind of visualize from a requirement all the way down into a solution. And we're going to do that live on the show today. And we're going to be doing it not only through the approach, but we're also going to be live diagramming a solution. And we also have some great moderators on the channel today. So don't be afraid to ask questions during the whole part of the session here, and we'll queue them up in there for the Q&A session. But feel free to collaborate and answer questions within the channel itself. So let's dive into the next part here. And so we're going to cover the first thing we're going to cover here is the business requirement. And so this is the requirement that we have, and I'm going to read through sentences there in here and highlight certain sections that I think would be need to be bubbled up into high-level requirements. So Verity is an AI native fintech startup building a personalized investment research platform for independent financial advisors. think the first thing we want to look at here is it's kind of interesting, maybe not so much in the requirement side, but it is interesting because AI native really tells me that a lot of the solutions that they've already built, just in general in Verity, have been AI focused. So they're probably going to use MCP servers over APIs. They're probably going to use agents over some different aspects of user interfaces. And it just gives me kind of a frame of reference of what I'm thinking about here. So then going into the next sentence, the proprietary engine generates investment theses from real-time market signals, but those theses only have value when matched against specific client mandates, holdings, and suitability constraints in Salesforce. So here we know, so the first thing is they have a proprietary engine, and that proprietary engine generates investment theses. So there's some sort of research that's going on, and where is that research coming from? It's coming from those real market signals. But it's only valuable to have those if we can match them against specific client mandates. And it looks like those client mandates and holdings and constraints are in Salesforce. And then, so the next sentence, Verity's agentic system must take raw market signal through research, portfolio fit, and compliance checks, surfacing a personalized recommendation to the advisor through Verity's own interface without human intervention on the happy path. That's a lot. So the one thing we want to go in here is, looks like we already are talking about that from the AI native side. They have an agentic system, and we need to take those raw market signals, and we want to surface those personalized recommendations, and we want to do it through Verity's own interface. So I think those are the big ones to pull out of that one. And then the last sentence is, when compliance constraints are triggered or portfolio fit confidence falls below threshold, the system must escalate to a human reviewer and log the escalation with context in Salesforce. So the big thing here is, if something goes wrong, we need to escalate to the human, and we want to log the escalation in Salesforce. So those are the kind of the big things that I wanted to pull from the business requirements. And we're going to distill those down, paraphrase them out into a set of high-level requirements. So just going through those high-level requirements real quick, we want to ingest that real-time market signals and generate that raw investment theses. We want to retrieve client mandates, holdings, and suitability constraints from Salesforce. Then we need to take those and evaluate them against each other to generate a portfolio fit within compliance. The next part is, we want to take those findings and surface that as a personalized recommendation through Verity's own interface to the advisors. And then lastly, if we can't find a fit, or if there's some other issue that shows up there, we want to escalate that out to a human and log in Salesforce when the compliance thresholds are not met. So going into the next part here, we're moving from the what side, and we're going to kind of go through into the how. And our first requirement we're going to dive into is ingesting real market signals and generate raw investment theses. And so, as we've been talking about, we know that this is a proprietary engine, and we know that this is something that Verity has control over. And so our first assumption, I think, we want to make here is that research is proprietary. And it's not really an assumption in the classic sense, because we already know that it's in there. But based on that assumption, that I think we have to make the decision that there is some sort of Verity research engine that's available. We don't necessarily know what that state is. Is it an agent? Is it just a system? What's the integration points? Those are still kind of unknowns to us. But just to start off here, we have to have kind of line in the sand of where we're going to get those real market signals and those theses from. And so going into our diagram here, I want to grab these two pieces. And so we know we're getting that market data, and we know that there is our assumption and our decision is that there is a research engine available that is going to do that. And it's pretty much a black box for us. We don't necessarily know what's going on inside there, because that's proprietary Verity capabilities. And we just need to know where we're going to get it from. So this is kind of our start of our diagram. So going into the next couple of high-level requirements, the next thing is we want to be able to retrieve those client mandates, holdings, and suitability constraints from Salesforce. So the first thing I think I would think about here is, okay, I know that data is in Salesforce, but how am I going to get it out? And just because I have a MuleSoft and Agentforce background, my first inclination is, hey, wouldn't Agentforce be the way to do that? And as I look at this a little bit more deeply, I would come back and it's like, okay, well, there's no natural language processing that's needed. So I don't know if an agent's needed for that. And there's no sort of reasoning checks or instructions that I need to pull it from. And so maybe Agentforce isn't the best fit for this one. And so I think the decision we want to make for this particular requirement is, I think we want to use Headless 360. And specifically MCP. So now let's go and draw that out in the diagram. So we know we have a financial service cloud instance, because that's what we're using as far as the Salesforce instance goes, and we want to be able to pull the Headless 360 in from the side here, and so we're going to use that. And like I said, specifically, we're looking at the MCP server capabilities, and how do we want to get the mandates and portfolio fit? Is we want to pull in a couple of objects. And those two objects here, account and financial profile. So the first thing, just to draw it out completely here, is these two objects are going to have data pulls from MCP server into something. And we don't know yet what. We just know we need to get it somewhere. And so the first question that I would ask off of this is what is MCP server's capabilities? And there's a bunch of out-of-the-box servers that are available. And the one that I would instinctively use for this particular one, I'm not doing writes, I'm not doing a whole bunch of editing on things here. So S-object reads feels like it fits good. But going back to our decision, should we use S-object reads? Let's throw a little question in here. Should we, I'm just gonna kind of shorten it to, should we use out-of-the-box? And looking at that, I guess the next question is that the S-object reads would allow me to read every single object that whatever user I'm using to access this MCP server has access to see. So if there's cases, if there's opportunities, if there's the actual financial holdings of the customer, do we want the agent to be able to see that level of detail? And I think our assumption here is that we should limit the AI capabilities. Based on the requirements we have right now, I don't see a need to have the agent be able to abilities. I don't see the agent needing to have the ability to see the holdings of the customer at this point. And so I think at this point, we want to limit those agent capabilities. So that kind of takes the out-of-the-box S-object reads off the table. And so the way we want to go for and make this change is we want to use named queries. And so named queries is, for the people as old as I am, they're formally known as stored procedures. Essentially, a named query is just a canned query where the selection criteria, the where clause, is already predefined in a SOQL statement. And so you can't get like extra fields on the objects we're pulling from. And we want to limit the ability for the agent to see anything outside of the objects in the fields that we want to show. And so if I go back to our diagram here, I'm just going to put a little note here for myself to use, we're going to use named query. And then, so the next question, because we kind of alluded to it a little bit on the last one, is who is the user that we're going to connect to the MCP server with? And there's really a couple of choices we have here. So it's an agent. So if we wanted to, we could create a service account and connect that through the external client app. and then give the rights and responsibilities to that particular service account. And maybe that would be an approach that would make sense to go through. But then we kind of think about security a little bit more, and would it be beneficial if I, as a financial advisor, could see the customer profiles of other financial advisors' clients? And that's probably not a good thing. So on the assumption here, I'm pretty sure we want to assume that that I only want to be able to see my customer profiles, only see my profiles. And so that assumption takes us down into the decision that we want to use user context. So giving that we have those two pieces in place, this is really kind of shows off the governance side of things, and it allows us to limit the capabilities of the agent without impeding the capability of the user if they're using Salesforce directly. Now, as we go through and evaluate other requirements going forward, these decisions may change, but right now I think this is a good fit for where we want to go. And so let's look at the next requirement. We want to evaluate the theses against client context for portfolio fit and compliance. So I think the first question that I have there is where does this matching happen? Where does the matching happen? And so the matching, we talked about in the higher level view of the requirements there. The matching it's all proprietary. The engine's proprietary. The interface is proprietary. Verity. The first thing just in my head is the assumption is that I'm going to use those matching rules from Verity. Use matching rules. And now, does that make sense to copy them over from their engine and then to put them into Salesforce? Probably not, just because, and plus we'd have to drag the theses down and all that research. And so we're just kind of shuffling data at this point for not a whole lot of benefit. So with the matching rules assumption, I think we want to actually use the Verity engine for this as well. Okay, and so looking at that, the one change I would make to the diagram at this point is, because we don't really have much else to go on, is to let me switch that around, is those constraints and customer information would go into the Verity engine, and the theses would then be matched and generated from there. And so is that the right approach? Maybe, maybe not. But I think for what we have on the requirements right now, this seems to be the best fit. So going into the last set here, we want to be able to surface our personalized recommendation through Verity's own interface. And so this is where it gets kind of interesting, because what is Verity's interface is probably the next question I'd want to ask. And looking back, and let me just scroll back up to the top real quick, because I think it's pretty good to mention it here. Is we have Verity's own interface, but we also know that Verity has an agentic system. So I'm going to go and make the assumption at this point that that they have a human-facing agent that would be used for the advisor. So in here, I'm going to make the assumption that they have a human-facing agent. And so looking just kind of, so we have a Verity agent, we have that research engine in there as well, but maybe there's something there, maybe there's not, maybe it's just a research engine, or maybe it's an agent that is specifically isolated just to do research. And so I think the decision we want to make here is we want to use the Verity agent. And we're not going to use like a Salesforce agent here, again, because most of that data and integration and orchestration isn't happening inside Salesforce. So we're going to use the Verity agent. And so going back to our diagram here, I'm going to grab our Verity agent, and I'm just going to land them right there. And so what we're kind of showing here now is a slight change in our solution. Because instead of having the MCP route directly to the Verity engine, our Verity agent here becomes that orchestration piece, becomes the thing that orchestrates details across the entire landscape. So in the view that we want to have now is the Verity agent is going to go out, get the different information from Salesforce, and it's going to make a call up to the Verity research engine to pull down the theses. Either the agent's going to do the matching, or the Verity research engine is going to do the matching, and it's going to reply to the Verity agent with whether a match was found. And so if a match was found, we got our happy path, and our Verity advisor is in there, and they are making calls out to the agent. Okay, so I think that handles number 4. And then the last one here is to escalate the human reviewer to the human reviewer and log this in Salesforce with context when fit or compliance thresholds are not met. So who's doing that escalation? Is it the agent? Is it the research engine? Is it something in Salesforce? So looking at the back to our diagram here, I think the Verity agent, being that orchestration layer, is maybe not going to necessarily surface that there is a need, surface that there is a match or not a match. Maybe that's coming from the research engine, but the agent is going to be that orchestration, that holder of the information, and whether or not a match was found. And then, whether it's the agent or whether it's the research engine, something is going to give us details on why a match wasn't found. So I think the assumption here is we want to use the Verity agent. And then with that, the next question, or the next assumption that I think we should make is we need to log this in Salesforce. And so what are we going to use in Salesforce for that? So I think another assumption we can make is that what is the best way to log things in Salesforce for a human reviewer to look at? I think that has got to be cases for escalation. And so those two things tell me that the Verity agent is going to be making the escalation, and we're going to use cases for escalation. And so those two assumptions are going to lead us to the decision that we need to log a case in Salesforce. And so drawing those two across here, and so now let's look at what that does to the diagram. So the first thing I need to do is I need to pull our cases into our financial cloud. And this time we're actually going to be, let me switch that around. We're actually going to be writing cases from the MCP server from the Verity agent. So I'm going to add an apply directional arrow there. And so this seems like it's going to be a fit here. The next thing, much like the S-object reads that we had in the higher part, the out-of-the-box capability for writing to objects is something called S-object mutations. And now that we've also established that we're using the user context, do we want the agent to be able to write to any object that the user has access to? I'm just going to touch on the holdings again. I don't think we want the agent to necessarily autonomously sell shares of something from a customer portfolio. So I think going back to our decision platform here, just like in the last one, we are going to ask, are we going to use the out of the box? And I think the answer to that is, and this is going to be a fun little assumption here, I don't say the assumption is no. And so what decision does that get us to? Well, okay, so we're not going to use the out of the box. So S-object mutations is out. So we're going back into a custom MCP server capability. And then, is it a flow? Is it an Apex call? And just in the nature of that, most of that information is going to be coming from the Verity engine. And there may be some coding that we want to put in there. I think the assumption that we want to make here is that an invocable action is the right way to go. All righty. And so with that, let's go back to our diagram here and add invocable action. And so the nice thing about this is we can build off an MCP server, a custom MCP server for us to use to handle the majority of those integrations with that agent. And so I'm feeling pretty good about what we have here as far as the architecture goes. And the big thing to note once we get to this point is if going back to our decisions is this becomes the inner workings of our decision log, of our solution design. And it's something for us to share with stakeholders, for them to understand. And this is the why part of the interface or of the three-step process. And so we want to be able to share that with the stakeholders, like why we made the approach we did. We also want to share it with other architects and other members of the team so that they have an understanding of like why we went in the direction we went to. And I know from personal experience of rifling through a bunch of emails when I try to find why I made a decision I made 3 months ago, having this documented somewhere that is easily reachable becomes a very good asset to have. And so I think we're good on this. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring back our experts and let's move on to some of the Q&A. Welcome back, Leo and Carl. Just before we get started with the questions, any sort of thoughts towards the architecture?
Yeah, I think you did a great job. I learned a lot on how to tell the story and show decisions.
Yeah, thanks. Carl?
Nothing at the top level. I think there's maybe decisions that you made that we can go into why you made those decisions to help everybody kind of understand the trade-offs or the reasons to go one way or another as we go through it.
All right, perfect. All right, so let's start with some of those questions. So we have a question from An, and she says, if Salesforce has always been an API-first platform, explain it to me like a fifth grader. What are the key differences since going headless? It would be good to discuss the key new terms like surfaces and experiences.
Yeah, maybe I can start first, and then I'll throw it to you, Carl. We've been API first for a long time. It's been a key principle of our architecture. But what's changed, and we say this over and over, is LLMs and agents. And so, what does that mean? Salesforce isn't just accessed through a browser anymore. We're not just building system integrations. MCP clients, agents, agentic interfaces are now a new standard for how everyone works with technology and software. And so a key part of us evolving our APIs is embracing the MCP standard, which is more agent first. Everyone thinks a lot about the MCP tools, but it also has two other key components around how do you share resources and how do you share prompts, key new artifacts that are important for the agent world. The other key part, and you mentioned services, is we're headless in the sense that Salesforce now just isn't something you log into, say, in the Salesforce mobile app or login.salesforce.com. It's going to be in Microsoft Teams. It's going to be in Slack. It's going to be in ChatGPT, the various agentic interfaces that are there. And so that is a strategic and important change to how do we think about building usable experiences for you to work with Salesforce? What does it look like now to work with accounts and contacts and leads? And so I would highlight those as two big things where headless isn't, of course, it's built on the foundation of API first, but it's really about our transformation to embrace agents.
All right, I'm gonna take a stab of explaining it like a fifth grader. If we think about API, let's look at it like a window into a kitchen. Yeah, we've had that. You can reach in, you can maybe get out some food. Maybe the food is cooked sometimes. What's different now is headless lets you take that entire kitchen and put it in somebody else's house, right? So you can give some ingredients and ask for it to be cooked, and it comes out the way that you want. Like that's the difference of kind of an unintelligent way to get something in and out through an API versus a fully described, fully functioning, all the process and flows, putting it wherever you want.
Perfect. And so adding on top of that, we have another question that I think, Carl, that you kind of alluded to there, just to nail the point home. Can you say more about what an MCP server is and what it has to offer over a traditional API?
Right. So MCP, Model Context Protocol, right? We throw around acronyms a lot, but it was designed fairly recently as a way to let these agentic systems understand what another system does and then execute it. So if you think about traditional API, it's like just a phone book of endpoints. Your agent would have to read that whole phone book to figure out what it is, the data that gets back. It's kind of dumb, but really powerful, right? Because we've lived off APIs, but you have to know what to do with it. The MCP server, I look at it as, well, now the agent has a toolkit with labels, right? You have a semantic name, something like get financial transactions versus just an endpoint that you can query. You have a description of what it does. You have suggestions of where you want to use that endpoint, as well as a schema of what comes back. So there's a lot more built-in context for these systems that reason to say, oh yeah, this is what I want, instead of trying to reverse engineer an API and figure out if it was the right thing. Like, that's the power it brings to agentic.
Great. Okay, so the next question. So the design use named queries. Why not give the agent free SOQL access?
Let me take that broader first and talk about some of the different layers in getting an external system to talk to an internal system, and then we can kind of go to named queries. Okay. The first place you're going to start is you're going to start with external client apps. This is what replaced connected apps, if you're familiar with it, because it has additional security on it. That is your identity bridge. That gets an external system, an MCP client, into Salesforce, right? You give it a scope to say, hey, I want the MCP API scope. What's important to recognize, that is not an authorization boundary. Meaning, once you have a token in, you can access any MCPs. So from an MCP perspective, you mentioned the standard MCP servers that we have. They do wonderful things, reads, mutations, we have things for Tableau, Data Cloud, so forth. Once you have that ECA access, you can call any of these that have been activated. We let you activate, we let you deactivate. We do not let you pick and choose at this point in time. So if you do reads, you'd be able to query, you'd be able to do everything that that user can do. So now we need to talk about user. I'm going to jump back to the ECA, because with the ECA, you can set it up to run in two ways. You can do a named user, which is the authorization code flow, where you're going to link to a particular person, and it's going to inherit the profile, the permissions, the record access of that person. Or you could run it as a single integration user. So the client credential flow, where you create a specific user and give it a scope of data. What's important to now understand is that MCP server is running as the user. So if the user can read accounts and read financials and read cases, the agent can do that. In your example, Scott, you said, I don't want the agent to get to financial information. I only want them to be able to read cases. Well, they're running as a user. The user can see financials. Now we have an obstacle. That's where you go to the custom server, right? The custom server is going to let you do three things. It's going to let you add tools. It's going to let you do prompts. And I forget what the third thing is. But what that means is you can say with a named query, I just want you to access this object with these fields. With then the invocable apex or the flows, you can say, these are the actions I want you to do. And then the prompts themselves will give you guidance as to what to do. So it will say the agent acting on behalf of the user can now do less than the user. You've scoped it to what you want it to do. So that's
and mostly
answer, but it gives you all the kind of pieces of how you structure it together.
Right, and so mostly it's a security aspect that we want to do it for. Leo, you got more to say on this, or do we want to move to the next question?
The one of the quick consideration plus one everything that Carl said, it helps limit scope. It helps control security, the blast radius, and it also gives a little more context where you can give these name specific actions. So you know, if you just want to look up a contact for this region, here's a name query to do that every time.
Perfect. That's a great answer. Okay, so the next one is so it's from Puneet. Can we connect Slack with Salesforce MCP? Yeah, I guess that's the whole question. Yeah.
So David answered yes in the chat if you're following the chat, and he also said he's maybe working on something to demo it. So we will let Slack go into another session. I'd love to talk about it. It would fit into Headless very, very well, but that wasn't part of your requirements, right, Scott? So we'll skip that one for today.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I did think about that when going through there, and to me it was right, no mention of Slack in the interface at all, and the big one was Verity's agentic interface. It made it sound like that they had like a customized solution, whether it's a Claude, whether it's a website, we don't know. The requirements didn't go into that level of detail. Okay, good. And then so another question we have here. Let's see. So why Headless 360 instead of native Agentforce? So like, why not just build an agent that the user interacts with? I could start with that one, and then feel free to jump in. Like for me, understanding that, again, it ties back to the requirements. Verity has built their own agent, and if they went the Agentforce route, I think that would have been good. But what we don't know from the requirements is kind of where things took place. And an AI native company is probably going to build things like how they want to build it first, and then figure out how to tie the pieces together. So Leo, if you want to go in and add some details.
Yeah, it's very much an and. It depends on where your customers are interfacing with agents. So of course, Agentforce is here to help you work with your CRM data, with your sales, your service data. But we know that everyone is using agents from many different surfaces. And so we also want to embrace that a ChatGPT agent should be able to talk to the Salesforce agent. But yeah, if you're a great use case for Agentforce, it's really easy, or it's a canonical use case is building a help agent, an agent that helps answer questions to your customers. Salesforce Agentforce has a great answer for that.
Yeah, definitely.
I would hone in on one piece as my justification if I was doing this like in front of the review board again. The proprietary IP in the Verity agent. I would say that's not necessarily something that you would want to or would be well suited to move into the Salesforce platform. Now, that doesn't mean if they then start adding requirements to say, well, we want our advisor to interact directly with the Verity agent, and we want to do it in Slack and Teams, and we want to let our customers do it from the website. Well, then you still would have a place where you could say Agentforce can be the distribution layer for that. Consolidate the calls, still can call to the agent, still can have the logic there. But now it hits all those surfaces that we talked about with the governance all sitting in one place. The other flip side of that, I don't know if anybody asked this question, but why didn't we do it just with the REST API directly like we've always done? You want to take a stab at that, Leo? If not, I can take a stab at it, but I have my reasons why.
I think you can, you should, but the REST APIs have been built over years. They're pretty open. They're designed for specific use cases, clients, and so this is where we've seen an LLM agent can figure some things out, but it's a little messy. And so this is how we can come up with an MCP server, give it a little more context. That's the general pattern that comes to my head first. You should try. What we've seen is it's easier to give context in agent, an MCP tool and server.
So you have a lot more cost in building it because you're going to have to do a lot more explain it. The other piece to me, this sitting in financials, the regulatory aspect of it, the governance piece. If you're going to build it yourself, you need to build all the governance with it. Scott, you didn't go into the details, but because you're on the Salesforce platform and doing all these things, you have the audit trail, you have things like event monitoring, you have backup and recovery, you have agent observability. Like there's so many places where now you can see what you need when a regular or banking regulation comes in versus building it yourself in REST. Like those would be my justifications of why you made the right choice.
Yeah, and it's only an hour-long session, so if we went in all those details, we'd still be covering those. All right, let's go to the next question. So this one's from Jolene. Are you going to build an agent to go through this QA and decisioning? I guess I'm going to take that one. We're going to build an agent to go through this Q&A. So, I mean, like with anything, I'm pretty sure like as we build out the solution, if we were to take this solution down into development, absolutely, we'd want to test. And the interesting thing about like, and anyone who's tested or dealt with agents lately, the probabilistic is interesting. Sometimes frustrating, but it's really kind of it's not like old code where you'd write a code and you'd build some test cases and that you put these inputs out, you're guaranteed to get these input, these outputs back. I think, and so as you go through QA, any sort of Q&A, there's really kind of two sides of it. Is like the first side is, does the agent behave the way I think it does? And that's like a binary answer, yes or no. But I think the second question in there is the agent answering the questions as well as it could be? And that goes into like the new thing I'm going to call on QA is there's a lot of tuning. You want to mess with the dials. You want to change your prompt text. You want to maybe create another model in there that has a lower temperature setting. So the answers are a little bit more similar. But there's a lot to it, I think, on the QA side of things, and you know that's probably a whole other think like an architect.
So I actually read the question a little bit different. I thought the question was, are you going to build an agent to go through the QA, meaning the questions that folks are asking on the call? And what not for the QA specifically, but as you probably know, we're very large users of Slackbot inside of Salesforce. There are architect thought frameworks out there, different ways to approach a problem, to justify, to look at options. I wrote a skill in Slackbot that makes you think like an architect, and I did apply it to the scenario that you shared with us, Scott, to look at different things. So yes, you could extend that and add your own skills, add your own ways to give you kind of a more structured and consistent thought process with some of the tools outside of this solution.
But always verify your agent findings. I've learned my lesson on those a couple of times. All right, great. So I don't know, we're doing a pretty good on time, I think. Is there a decision guide on when to use S-object reads versus named queries? I think that's an architecture within the architecture site. I don't know if there's one specifically for that yet. I don't know if Leo, Carl, have you seen anything?
I remember the early days when we were first talking about should we build name queries and why. My simple answer would be, if you have a repetitive query that should always work in the context of like a business question, write a name query. If you're exploring, use S-object. And so a concrete example that we had when we were thinking about this feature is a lot of people want to look up information about their current consumer. Is it the contact table? Do you care about accounts? Which is it a custom entity? And so this is a great way to write a name query. It says, when I want to learn about the customer I'm talking to, here's how to get that information.
Yeah. And I love what you said earlier, sorry, real quick, Carl. I love what you said earlier too, about it being instead of like an open resource where I just have to figure out the fields, the columns, and the where clause. This name query, I can create a description around it that would allow the agent to directly use the information. Go ahead, Carl. Sorry.
And my decision criteria looks at it from the governance side of when I want to do less than the user can do. That's a great place for a name query. Fewer fields, fewer objects, and so forth.
Okay, we have another question here from Akash, and it's why are we using an MCP server? Is there any workaround or a substitute? I think we answered that one. We talked about the API side, and I think the other thing to note, like we mentioned before, AI native. You have an agent for we didn't talk about Agentforce vibes, and maybe we'll talk about that in a second. But like as there are more developers that are using vibe coding tools that are out there, setting up an API, there's still some manual work to get that going with the name credentials and all that stuff. And the vibe coding tool could do some of that stuff on the Salesforce side, but whatever the agent is built in now, I think the agents are better at coding MCP connections than they are building APIs. Anything
I would just add to that. If you've ever sat and used the Claude to develop, or Cursor or Agentforce Vibes, and you watch the way it thinks, if it doesn't have an MCP server at its disposal, it usually goes through trial and error. Like, oh, I tried this, it failed. Oh, this wasn't quite right. Let me try this again. Especially if you're deploying to Salesforce. Oh, I forgot this object. Once you give it an MCP server, you can see how it operates more intelligently. It knows that I use this for this purpose, and this is how I interact with it. That's why we used it in this case, because we had a very specific use case with an agent on one side. The options are what we talked about. Rest, build something yourself, let it try and figure out the APIs. It doesn't always come out to the best solution. And here you want something that works, right? You don't want the advisor having it work half the time and coming back, oh, I'm sorry that didn't work for you. You're right. I should have tried it differently. Like, you just need it to be rock solid. That's why it's the right choice.
Definitely. Okay, so we have another question from Ray. So moving my current setup, I have Salesforce into a headless 360 architecture from a traditional Sales Cloud setup with standard record pages, UI, etc. What should I expect? What are, this is like a lot of questions here. What should I expect? What are going to be some of the hurdles for us? And is there any sort of sequence of actions I should be looking at now to be prepared?
We are actively thinking about what does Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Commerce Cloud look like in a headless world. I think the first thing before you plan further is to experiment with Slack, with Slackbot connected to Salesforce. Because I think there's going to be an art, and everyone is learning about what are users expecting to be able to do now through, say, Slackbot and an agent. The UI is still here because there are many scenarios where a big, rich UI screen of information laid out intentionally by a user is super valuable. And so I think some of your UI pages should stay. They will be linked to. They will be accessible from an agent. What we now are thinking through is what does the out-of-box experience look like to provide the most relevant information for common user queries? And so we know that some customers have hundreds of fields on an account or contact. Maybe how do we correctly show the 10 relevant first? And so that would be my first advice. Before you plan any major changes, I think start using Slackbot with Salesforce now. Get a sense of what the agentic interactions are. And we've already have been evolving Salesforce UI before the headless announcement. If you've tried our chat client with Lightning types and Lightning web components, you kind of see some of the customization that already exists today. Or how do we make Salesforce more agent and conversation friendly?
I would add to the experimentation. We have a site that you can go to called Agentforce Labs, where you can get hands-on with some of the different concepts as well too. There's a headless experience layer where you can see what that looks like when you think about going to surfaces. From a how do you get ready or hurdles? If there's places where you don't have the data in Salesforce, whether it be Salesforce or Data Cloud, and people take actions or they go out of Salesforce, that's important to look at those gaps. If there's processes that aren't defined or don't exist as flows or Apex that people are doing over and over again, like those are what's going to drive your headless experience layer in other ways. If an action doesn't exist or data doesn't, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to do it from Teams. You're not going to be able to do it from voice. So look for those gaps as hurdles that could trip you up in the experience as well too.
Great. Okay, we have a couple more questions here. So from Paulo, how can we prevent a user from taking the configuration and his login and use a public open model like his personal cloud desktop to connect to a Salesforce MCP and pull PI data? Oh, that sounds like a good one for Carl.
So I look at the stages, right? I've built kind of a risk journey with somebody exporting data and putting it in their personal model to giving their login to somebody, and then thinking about, well, I'm going to use the MCP standard to the custom to using Agentforce, and like each one you check off different governance boxes. If you start looking at logins and login information, you have through event monitoring, every customer has logins and logouts. You could use the login information and look at where people are coming from and see if there are particular places where you're seeing different IPs or different browser configurations. Many of our customers, when they want to be more proactive, they buy the full Shield event monitoring package, because what that starts surfacing is login anomalies. When we see something that looks different, we'll fire an event for you to handle. It also adds the ability to have transaction security policies, which you can use to block. So if you start seeing logins from particular places that you want to block because it isn't sanctioned usage, that's where you can do it. The reality is it's kind of hard to do that. The best path is to give them the sanctioned AI path to say, yes, we've built agreements with these particular providers. We have zero data retention. We have zero training. And this is how you connect and use it so that it does stay governed and trusted and you know what it does. Because otherwise...
Ooh. I think, Carl, you
drop
phased
them?
out a little bit there.
All right,
Yeah.
no worries. I was done.
Okay. But no, I mean, I agree there too. Like, but the other side, I think to note too is, if this user doesn't have like admin capabilities, then they can't create external client apps and they can't do all those other things in there. And so they would get whatever access that we gave to the agent in the first place. And so kind of like what we talked about, not sharing other people's customers' information. And so in the old days, right, if I was so inclined to, when leaving a company, to drag down, and there people do things, and they're not good things that they do, but I don't know if the MCP world is going to change how that kind of puts together. We can only add, like your point, Carl, we can only add more guardrails and do a better job at detecting when those things happen. Okay, so a couple more questions came in. So we have one from Sarah here. Can you please explain one more time how to restrict sensitive objects like Gong conversation objects?
Yeah, maybe the natural way I would think about it is, how do you restrict it first for a user? Say Carl, the user login is Salesforce, and so permission sets, sharing rules is the first answer. And now once you've done that, you know that Carl or Carl's agent pretending to be Carl can't access to it, but maybe Carl does, and you want to make sure that Carl can, but no agent can. And so this is the tricky part. And we've been talking about these concepts of, so how do I control access from an agent, which is generally API exposed if it's coming from outside Salesforce, or with agent force actions inside. With either of those, this is where you can think about creating specific actions, named queries, controls for agents as if they were APIs. Like, so just stepping way back, I think it's those two. Control it for the user first, permission sets, sharing rules, and then controlling for the agents by controlling what type of APIs and calls an agent can make. Carl, anything else to add to that in terms of like simplifying governance? Because it's tricky. There's a lot of different variables and levers to play with.
The only other thing is looking at if you're going the standard server route, like, hey, if you just want to read, make sure you give reads, not all or mutations or deletes. To your point, Leo, where it gets tricky is if you're saying, I want the agent to do less than the user can. That's what drives you to the solution that you described.
Yeah. And it's one thing I thought about too, just going through this scenario is, as architects, especially like Salesforce architects, we've been trained, like mentally trained, hey, if there's an out of the box capability for this, let's use it. And so to me, as an architect on MCP, you've always gone through and say, okay, does the out of the box tool does it do what we need it to do? Would it be more expensive to write a custom scenario, or would it be overkill? And one thing I took from this is that with MCP servers, there is a kind of divergent inside that thought process. It's like, for that, like, if you want the, like, I think you talked about, if you want the agent to do everything the user can do, then out of the box may be okay. But if you want to control that, if you want to limit that in there, and I think if you also want to give the agent like a better capability of being able to understand what tools it has at its disposal, then the customized route may be a good fit there as well.
It's what we've always said, like preparing for scenarios is you start with out of the box. When you need a more powerful version of X, that's when you customize. So when you need a more powerful version of security, that's where you go to a custom MCP.
Yeah, it's the least privilege principle, right? You start off with the least privileges, and then you kind of open as the pieces need to come in. We do have a follow-up question from Sarah here. is how do you restrict access for MCP?
So that was the pattern I started. You're going to use an external client app to grant MCP API access. Within that external client app, you can specify the profiles or the permission sets that somebody has that will grant them access to it. After that, it's going to give you access to all of the standard MCPs or custom MCPs that you've activated. If you've decided not to activate mutations or delete, they won't have access to it, but there is not a MCP server or tool level access controls yet. I mean, Leo, maybe you can build it future looking, but that doesn't exist today. So it's kind of once you're in and you've been granted, you have access to everything that's been enabled.
Yeah, maybe one other call out is there is the API enabled user perm. And so you can disable that, which disables API access. And I believe right now the way we've done it is MCP is it's another standard protocol on top of our APIs. I think that'll also start with the API enabled user perm, and especially turn that off for users that don't need API access.
And Carl, the MCP server location you talk about in the settings is also where you'd go to add your custom MCP servers and then enable or disable those as well, right?
Yeah, so the MCPs right inside of setup, you go forth and can activate and deactivate the standards. You can create a new, and then you'll pick the tools, the actions, the prompts. If you're going to do name queries, you create name queries in a separate spot. There is currently a setting where you have to enable making those available. Then you go to your API catalog. You can then activate it there, and then you can put it into your custom MCP server. So there's steps. It is all documented. I know I went through it quickly. I've done it quite a few times, so it's becoming muscle memory now. But it's all in setup. A lot of declarative ways to do it as well too.
Okay, a couple more questions. I think we're getting close to time. So when you talk about S-object mutations and say that the agent can update any object, is that true? Mutations. It can update any object. Is that true? I would expect the agent to take the permissions of the connecting user. Can you talk more about security? And I think we alluded to it a little bit on some of the questions we've had, but if you want to really drill that point home.
Our security model applies, whether it's a user, an agent, or agent acting on behalf of a user. And so very few people in very few Salesforce users that have the ability to modify all data. And because of that, very few agents will as well. Now, key nuance is we do allow you, when you're building an Agentforce agent, to also specify a unique permission set. And so like permission sets, our security model, all those patterns still apply. They could just now be assigned to agents, users. The trickiness is when agents are acting on behalf of users.
Right, definitely.
And what I would encourage people to do is go look at the MCP server. If you haven't clicked into it, I'm going to do it on my other screen, but when you click into mutations, it'll show you the tools and describe the tools that are available to it. So if you're curious as to what can mutations actually do, well, right here from a tool perspective, I can get related records. I can SOCL, I can create a record, I can update a record. That gives you, hey, broad permissions, but then to Leo's point, the profile permission set's going to scope it to exactly what objects, what fields, and so forth. But that's the place where you can see what the MCP server itself unlocks.
Great. So I guess, and we're actually really close to being out of time. So I'm going to thank you both for sharing today, and thanks for your participation. Thanks for everybody for attending today's session. Going back over to our screen share here, please, click this link or go to this survey, take a quick picture, and share your feedback for the episode. And also, thank you so much for. Thank you for being here. I can't get the slide to work. All right, thanks everybody.